Hello and welcome, everyone. Super excited that you are here to join us for this conversation today. This is a conversation about safety in breathwork. And what does safety in breathwork mean? What does safety in breathwork look like? Why is it important to even talk about having safety in breathwork and to have conversations like these? That's all open and on the table for discussion. And so I am Lisa McNett. I'm the founder of One Breath Institute. With me is Debbie Schirmann, our co-founder. We have Pete and we have Robyn. And yeah, maybe we could just go around and do little super short introductions of ourselves and just a little super short introduction of ourselves, and then we'll dive into the conversation. So we'll go in the same order as before. Pete.
Hi, thanks, Lisa. Yes, my name is Pete Craig, and I'm a coach, entrepreneur, and a breathwork facilitator. My primary focus is working with heart math and regulation, body regulation, nervous system regulation. And I think from that perspective, I think safety always comes up, and safety is an important thing. And as a coach and as a mentor, I know that the ability to create safety is the key to creating breakthroughs for people in their lives. And that's not just within the breathwork field, but that's just naturally when people feel safe, then people are much more able to create healing and create growth within themselves. So for me, it's a foundational piece. How do we make people feel safe, and how do we create safety? And for me, that's not just with words. Words can be manipulated in so many different ways. We have to figure out how we actually create safety, not just in one moment, but with safety throughout the process, and also make it acceptable and make it clear that if you don't feel safe, that you can talk about it, and make it safe for people to come forward and say that something's wrong, that I don't feel safe, or I didn't feel safe, or that something happened to me, rather than making people feel even more shame than they perhaps do.
Thank you, Pete. I'm going to keep you here. I know I said we'd go around and introduce ourselves, but you said so many things that perked my curiosity. And so, one thing I wrote down: safety is the key to creating breakthroughs. Safety is the key to creating healing. And so, would you share any more on, you're also talking about there's ways to create safety that are beyond words, and that words can be manipulative. So how would you say that we create that safety so that a person can have their breakthrough or their healing?
I mean, I think the first piece, let's just rewind a little bit. And I have a firm belief, and I've seen experiences of this, and I've experienced it in my own work, whether as a coach or as someone who's being coached and being guided through processes, is that, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, you have to do the work yourself. One thing I notice is that the deeper you go in your own process, the deeper you go in your own work, the more trauma you clear, the clearer a channel you become, the clearer energetically you become. And that allows your clients to go deeper and to have greater breakthroughs. So that's where my experience of, when you can create that safety, is almost like, imagine you're falling from a building. And it's the difference between falling from the building and having one of those big stunt airbags at the bottom to catch you, and nothing at all. And knowing that there's someone that's been as deep or deeper than you, and that can allow you just to go that little bit further, can make a huge difference. But that doesn't come just with words. You just saying that to me doesn't give me the confidence to go there. I have to actually feel it. I have to experience it. And the only way you do that is through, the processes that we engage, but also like I said, your words are operating on a mental level. And that they can be They can be manipulated, they can be twisted a little bit, they can follow a different path. And that's not always the path that your nervous system is projecting. Yeah, so we all kind of have this frequency. We pick up on different people's where different people are. It's like, you know, you can go and sit next to someone and you can feel a bit off, and you can feel like, and then you can sit next to someone else, and it's almost like, yeah, you kind of just feel this instant. And that's, yeah, that's kind of like biological. That's, yeah, that's the body doing that. And we have, you know, we have some influence over it through the breath. We know that as breath workers. But yeah, it also comes, you know, from actually being clear, from actually having, yeah, a kind of a pure intent, you know, for the interactions that you're having with people. And I like to kind of refer to a distinction that was made for me, you know, between the words intent and intention, and people often kind of mix those two together. And this distinction was given through some training that I had with Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of the 4 Agreements. And he talks about intention is the thought. Yeah, it's my intention to do this. It's my intention to do good. Yeah, so that's coming from a thought process. It's coming from a mental process, a mental construction. The intent is the will. It's the energy. It's the drive. It's the force that's behind it. Yeah, it's almost like that's the heart that's behind it. So intention, yeah, someone could do things with great intention, yeah, but if the intent isn't aligned with the intention, then there's a disconnect. And so I think it's important, again, you know, that we really get clear, you know, on what our intent is, and our intent should always be for the outcome that the client wants. Okay, let's not kind of mix things up. You know, it's very easy to kind of mix up what we want for the client and what the client actually wants. So it's very, very clear, you know, that they understand that we're on the same page as them, and that we have the ability to check in with them regularly to make sure this is still what the outcome that they want. And that if they feel that this is not going the way that they want to go, that they can raise that as well.
Beautiful, Pete. Yeah, I just want to take a breath. You know, that clarification that you just made about intention and intent is something I don't think I've heard before. And I really appreciate that, because we speak a lot to intentions and what is the intention that a person is coming with, and what is my intention, and that intent being of the heart. Yeah, I'm going to really sit with that. I really appreciate that distinction. So thank you. Okay, Robyn, I've seen you shaking your head yes a lot. So yeah, just a little quick introduce of who you are, and then anything else you want to bring in.
Okay, well, my name is Robyn. I've been in the field of mental health for 40 years. Sometimes as a professional, sometimes as a service user, because I've got CPTSD. Mainly I've worked with sexual abuse and self-harm. That's been the biggest bulk of what I did before breathwork. I've been involved in breathwork for about 4 years. I'm done rebirthing, a Buteyko instructor, TRE, trauma release exercises, and 2 years with Alchemy. I loved what you said there, Pete. There was so much there about safety, and I love that we're all talking about safety. And I think one of the things for me is about learning ourselves how far we want to go, and never pushing somebody past where we've been. And that it's really okay as a facilitator to say, no, I'll pass you on to somebody that does know, because we're working with people's lives. And And although I primarily work with people who self-identify as having trauma, because a lot of us will have it, most of us has got it and we don't even know, or there's so much shame around trauma that people will deny it. It's what I did for a lot of years. I knew it intellectually, but I just really didn't want my life to be how it had been. So I would always be dissociating. So I think those things we have to be really careful when we're working with somebody, what is actually happening for us and for the other person. Not that not at all that the person is being dishonest if they don't know, because we can forget our trauma. We cannot want to know, we don't know what's going to arise. And as facilitators, we need to make sure the space is safe and that person that we're working with knows how to say, no, I don't want to do this. No, I don't like this. Or yes, I do. Or yes, I want more of it. I think for me as well, particularly in the area of touch, where people may not know if they want to be touched, they may not know how to say no, because if they've had a life of saying yes, they're not going to come to a breathwork thing and suddenly say, no, I don't like it, because if their whole training has been yes, 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 how can we encourage that person to feel it's okay to say no, that they've even got a choice? So those are some of the issues that concern me quite a lot. I find the way that I works well, obviously, of showing grounding, reminding grounding before we get into any breath work. How do you feel in your body? What does it mean to feel safe in your body? Do you know what it means to feel safe in your body? That can be an assumption sometimes. The language that's used, drop into your body. I often think of people I grew up with, if you say drop into your body, they're going to think, what are you talking about? What are you talking about when you say grounding? What does that mean? How do I feel safe? Where do you feel safe? So a real emphasis on that. And also to take breathwork slowly, because it's so powerful. Many people as well who've maybe have CPTSD, we've got this desire to go, I want to get rid of it all now. So rush into those massive cathartic breathworks, which don't work on a physiological level, on a psychological level, on a biological level. It's like spewing everything out. It's all on the floor and you just stood in sick. That's not healing. That is not healing. And I think in my experience, real healing comes tiny bit, incrementally. You know, we've taken a long time to live with this trauma, put all these barriers up to try and stay safe. It's going to take a long time to undo that. So that worries me sometimes when people think that a couple of big breathes and they're going to be great and it's all going to be fine, because that's more disassociation, re-traumatizing and quite dangerous. So safety in breathwork is paramount for me.
Thank you, Robyn. I'm going to take a breath with that. And you brought up some really great points. And the one piece that is really like screaming at me right now is that, how to ground with the body, how to connect with the body. And so what would you say, because I can resonate with having clients who, like you're like, connect with your body, drop into your body. They're like, they might not tell you they don't know what you're talking about, but later on when you're asking them how things went, they're like, I was over there, seeing butterflies and you're like, oh, okay. So, what would you say? How to, what is one thing that you could offer for somebody on how to ground or how to feel or connect with their body?
Okay, the one, I mean, there are lots, as you know, and we can find our own ways of doing it. The one that sticks with me, wearing a hat. I often wear a hat because then I can feel where my head is. It may sound very odd, but I know then where my head is. So how our feet are on the ground. And I think, how do you walk? If you notice yourself stood, how are you stood? Are you stood forward? Or are you stood backwards? Really press the entire foot into the ground. Just how does that feel before we get into anything fanciful? Can you feel it? Can you actually feel it? And to be describing how that feels, and can you feel your body in your hips? Can you feel it? But very slowly, because I think there often comes a point where people do suddenly say, oh, I feel safe. And you're not going to know you feel safe until you feel it. If you've never felt it, you're not. So my favorite one at the moment is definitely really feeling how the ground feels on the soles of my feet and my hat. and I think there are definitely loads of things out there on the internet of how to ground. But I think the best ones will come as one learns what works for them, wherever they are at the moment. And breathing, of course, breathing in, breathing out, doing what we call the coherent breath, as we'll know, of 5 in, 5 out, and repeating that, and following your breath.
Thank you, Robyn, for bringing in some practical tips to help people. Because if you can start to connect with, my hat, connect with my feet, know that I'm feeling, then then you can start to, what I'm hearing is that you can really start to know what you're feeling maybe in a breathwork session. And just one other piece before I pop it over to Debbie that I want to just highlight for everybody is that you always have a choice. This is what Robyn is saying. A lot of people go through their life not knowing that you can say no to touch, right? And that's from everything, going to a doctor's office and the doctor, okay, let me, if you're a woman, let me do this breast exam and massage your breasts, right? At the doctor's office. So that might be a seemingly, this is for my health, innocent way. But if that somebody is touching us, but it's also, maybe we don't like it, maybe it doesn't feel good. But if we let somebody do that in the doctor's office, we might think, it's okay to do it, in the yoga studio or in the breathwork space, that my breath worker might also need to do that. So anything that feels uncomfortable, if you don't want to have that breast exam, you don't have to have the breast exam. You can feel your own breasts for some lumps. And that's just, just bringing in a very real and true uncomfortable thing that I don't want to say yes to, right? But that a lot of women might think, oh, I just have to do this. And that helps to bring in that idea of what's the feeling I get there? And then when do I get that feeling again, right? So, Debbie. Oh, Robyn. And then Debbie.
Yeah, can I just say about touch? Sorry, Debbie, if you're about to speak. But also for the facilitator to really know that if your client says, no, I don't want to be touched, that means no. It doesn't mean a pat on the arm saying, okay, you don't have to be touched. And for the facilitator, if they're pissed off or upset about it, they need to deal with that, not to put it on the client, not expect the client to make the facilitator feel better, because I've had experience of that where the facilitator got very upset because I didn't want to be touched. And then I felt, well, I didn't make them feel better, but that's what they were asking for. So to really know those boundaries for yourself as facilitator, not to take it for granted that somebody will want to be touched, not for that to be a common thing. Thank you for letting me jump in again there.
Debbie. And thank you, Robyn.
Debbie. Okay, hi. So I think the first question was just a check-in of who we are. Um, and I
And then
love,
dive into wherever you
yeah,
want.
and
We
then I
changed the
love
format.
how passionate you, Pete, and Robyn are. It feels very stimulating in my body to hear both of you speak. And I just recognize that it's motivation, right? And it's empowering. And it's really just grand to hear you both. So I'm Debbie, co-founder of One Breath Institute, and my history has been in the social work realms of child abuse and neglect and providing resources and legal support for families and family dynamics, and really passionate about ending generational trauma. And I'm really passionate about empowering people to be their own healer. So safety and breathwork to me, as a facilitator, as someone holding space, some big questions that I ask myself and ask my students to ask themselves, and anyone in this role, when we're holding space and being witness to someone else's life, are my actions serving me or serving them? So that's one. Am I doing this for me or for them? If it's for me, then it's for me, and it can be done outside of that space. And another piece that comes in is, do I believe that this person can heal themselves? Do I believe that they have all the tools with them? And the answer is yes. And so my actions and intentions will show that. Pete, you spoke of like frequency, and I do believe when someone, and I have experienced myself, when someone reaches a valley or a depth of healing and integration, they can speak and emit and just be an example, and that's enough. And people can feel that in that presence, right? They can pick up on that. They can pick up in their senses what it looks, feels, smells like, right? Because we all emit a smell depending on our emotions, right? So people are taking in those senses and naturally recognizing, oh, wow, this person feels safe in their body. Because ultimately, if I feel safe in my body, then I know what that really looks and feels like. I know the boundaries and the limitations. I know it for me in my experience. And then the other little piece that I just want to speak to today about safety and breath work, and just what I feel really inspired to speak to, is my experience is mine. Their experience is theirs. What safety looks, smells, tastes, feels like for me is for me. And my role as someone holding space is to encourage, empower, and explore with curiosity what that really looks, smells, feels, tastes like, envisions, dreams of, the list goes on for that person. Right? Because dandelions may not be soft and sweet in my experience. So coming full circle, what is safety? It's being curious of getting to know someone else's life experience. Like, we're human, number one, before we have any other role. We're human, human to human, coming from completely different life paths. There are some common things like grounding and being connected to the body, right? Being united, mind and body. And sometimes if people want to connect with the spirit and include that, they can, but they don't have to. So yeah, I don't know answers for people. I only know answers for myself. And I just ask people questions for them to get their own answers. And there are standards. So yes, choices, permission seeking. This is an obvious one to me, but clearly it is not obvious in the world. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Like, what can we do? I'll pass it over to you, Lisa. What question, and Pete and Robyn too, like, what can we do as different voices from different life experiences, different modalities, different tools, right? Like, what can we do to support safety specifically in the breathwork world? For me, it's setting an example, learning about trauma, but what else? Yeah, I don't know if that's a good opening for you, Lisa and Pete, but that's just the question. What else? And maybe it's not more, but just to make it known. Like, this is a known thing. Touch seeks permission. That's known fact. And I also just want to mention with touch, like, it's not just touch, like physical touch, like coming to the multidimensional aspects of ourselves. Sometimes you can feel the person on the other side of the room. We bring in our aura and our light body, right? We're touching. This is touch to me, depending on the intent with some other people, right? Yeah. So what else?
I'll keep it short and hand it back to Pete for the sake of time. But the big glaring in here for me is just that communication, right? Like, it's not, we're speaking to the frequency and the vibration and the sensation of a person, the energetic field. And, you know, I am a licensed massage therapist, so I have done a lot of touch over the years. And when I first started breath, I was like, touch. And now I hardly do any touch. And I can be 2 feet over somebody's field and they know exactly where I am the whole time. That is enough touch for a lot of people. But coming back to communication, like, it's not just my words, it's got to be all of it. But there also needs to be a lot of words, especially in the frame, our initial intake, our initial dialogue of, this is what we can expect, right? Like, we're going to meet for an hour. This is what our time together is going to look like. Of course, there's some flexibility for that, but just dialogue, continuous communication. So I'll hand it back to Pete.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. I mean, communication is key. There's a couple of things that I work on specifically with clients. Communication is one of those. In my experience, communication is usually the cause of most breakdowns, of most problems that people suffer. It's a communication between or it's a misunderstanding of what's been communicated. And I think this is where questioning becomes important, because we need to make sure it is our responsibility to make sure that the person we're communicating with understood the message that we want to communicate. So this is about reiterating, here's what's going to happen. Yeah, do you understand? Yeah, and a really kind of simple way is to have them repeat back. What do they understand? From what you just said, what does that person understand that you said? And then you can get clear really, really quickly, and you can become really aligned in how you're moving forward. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I think is that is super important, and that perhaps we need to look at, how do we bring this in a much wider sense, and that's awareness. So from a school's perspective, students need to be aware, or new breath facilitators, or even experienced ones, need to be aware of what's going on when someone's going through a breathing process. They need to be aware that altered states are occurring. And in those altered states, what does that mean? What's actually happening within the biology of the body? And how does that impact things like thought process? How does it impact decision making? How does it impact clarity? Because it's great to ask questions, but if the other person is in an altered state, and so their decision making capacity has been impaired, then you cannot take their silence as a yes. You cannot take their yes as a yes. So awareness at every level is important. So we need awareness within the breathwork industry. So facilitators need to be aware that this is what's going on. And at the same time, the general public or anyone that's coming to us for a breathwork session needs to also be aware of what's going on. And then we create real real understanding and real alignment. And you bring that together with the questioning piece and the repeating back, what did you understand that I told you was going to happen? Then we start to move into a space where actually, we're all a lot clearer, and we all feel a lot safer as well, because actually we've taken out any of the ambiguity, we've taken out a lot of the, the unknowns. And I think this is the problem. There's a lot of people come into breathwork just because they think. So there's two sides. There's the science side to breathwork, and then there's the more spiritual side. And a lot of people are just coming for the spiritual side, and they're trusting. They're very open, and they just want to be healed. They just want the trauma to go away. And so they're very, very open, and sometimes open to the extent that they make themselves more vulnerable. And then when you've got practitioners who aren't aware of what they're doing, perhaps it's not intentional, perhaps the intent is good, but what's happening is their misunderstanding of their use of words is actually, creating more trauma for that individual, because we don't know what's going on when someone's in that process. And, we can use words, in a very manipulative way. Words can be powerful, and it may not be our intent that we create more trauma, but in many cases we can create more trauma by being unconscious and unaware of the words that we're using. So I think there's so many levels, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make this much safer and allow people to make much more informed decisions.
Beautiful, Pete. Yes, thank you. Yeah, spiritual bypassing. A lot of people don't realize that that's what they're doing, but that seeking to feel good, that seeking to feel better, that seeking to connect, that seeking for love, that seeking for healing, it oftentimes we end up in spiritual communities or places where it's like high vibe, vibe high, and breath work, a lot of breath work out there is speaking to that, and is, because we do go to spiritual dimensions. We can go to spiritual dimensions and realms when we're in a breathwork process, and our trauma is living in our body. It's not living out there. It's living in our body. And so the only way to actually heal it is to become more embodied. And we have to come down into the body. And the practitioner, the facilitator, the person who is facilitating that space, this comes back to doing our own work, right? Like we can become a facilitator also from that space, but to really do the most good in the world, we need to come down and come in and go through that healing process ourselves. And as we do, it comes back to what we're all speaking to earlier of, Pete, I think you gave an example of like a mat, the soft mat for them to land, and our mat gets softer and deeper because we've been there, we've done the work, we can go deeper, so we can facilitate that deeper space. So let's take a breath with that. And then that final piece that I'll highlight is education, not only for the facilitators, the practitioners, the people who are leading, but education for the public, so that you can make an informed decision and know what you're getting into, know how to interview a breath worker, right? Because you don't, we just find somebody and just, that's the first person I found, so that's who I'm going to go to. No, interview that person. interview the person that's going to be holding space for you. See how that connection between you feels. Ask them questions so that you really get to know who's holding that space for you. So that public education, so that you can make informed decisions about proceeding with breath work for your personal healing or to become a facilitator. That is why we're having these roundtable conversations. And so with that, I want to thank you again, Pete. Thank you, Robyn. Thank you, Debbie, for being with us. I mean, Debbie, you were going to be here anyway. Thank you, Pete and Robyn, for being with us for this very first roundtable discussion. And this is going to be one of many, many conversations. So you're invited back again, and we'll also be bringing in more people who are all over the board. So Debbie and I, we obviously were the founders of One Breath Institute, and Robyn and Pete are not teachers, but they are both you've heard who they are. They both work in the breathwork field, but then in other realms as well. So we want to bring in other people's perspectives and bring those voices through. So like and share this video. And if you are somebody who wants to contribute to the conversation, you can reach out to us as well. So with that, I think we are 1 minute away from our agreed upon time. And if we want to say 1 or 2 words each in closing, I am just going to say I'm grateful for this conversation today.
Yes, I'm really pleased. Issues like safety, body safety are out there being spoken about because it's imperative. So thank you, Lisa and Debbie, for the space, and good to meet you, Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Robyn. Thank you, Lisa, Debbie. I think, just more awareness, as I said, of these topics and more conversations like this, I think is the way forward. So thank you.
Human to human. That's it. Let that land where it lands for those who are listening. We are humans to humans. And I'm moving my body. I'm going to move my body because I'm so stimulated and motivated by what we talked about today. And I really look forward to many, 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 infinitely more conversations. So thank you all.
Okay, in closing, let's take 1 more breath. And thank you again for joining us today.